When I was younger, a young mother, busy combining my lecturing, research, family life, training of the kids, and all the rest, we lived in a place that was ruled by a dictator. In fact, all our lives in Nigeria were plunged in politics that had absolutely nothing to do with democracy. It was one military regime after another, coups here and there, and half of the time we had no TV, no radio because there was no electricity most of the time. So we were not too much aware of what was going on except by conversations with people that were better than us to know what was going on, and had no time anyway to care for all this. Now that I'm older and retired, I tend to follow politics more closely, and this has been a very depressing experience. You just keep seeing things you don't want to see. You feel that you are ruled by people that are blind and basically illiterate with no idea of history. Of course, it's just an impression, but surely from the decisions that have been made, and you wonder who is ruling really. And thinking of it, reflecting on it, I remembered that there was a book in our library that was quite relevant and more, in fact, and this is it. Great Britain Has Fallen. And you can see that the author is called Wale Babatunde. He's a Nigerian, as you can see. And what he's seeing is how to restore Britain's greatness as a nation. And what he focuses on is mainly the spiritual aspect of the country we live in. I remember a Nigerian that was telling me that he knew about the missionaries that came to Nigeria, all the preaching, the evangelization, and then he went to study in Britain and came back as an atheist, saying they duped us, they didn't tell us the truth. These people pretending to be Christians, I went there was none. In fact, they were not Christians, the state is not Christian. He kept describing people that have deserted the churches, that the society is nothing like southern Nigeria where everybody goes to church. Even though we know that in Nigeria people go to church for other reasons apart from God. So this had a bad effect, a terrible effect on Nigerians. And that one came to Britain and had the same experience and said, what is it? What is it that caused it? And like millions of us, he started reflecting on the topic, on the subject, saying, why? Why is the country like that? And the thing is, what you see day to day is usually inflation, bad decisions, and there is no party that is better than the other. They have different agendas, but on the whole, you can't change the people like that with a flick of government change. And so Babatunde is saying that what is the problem is that we have abandoned God. And the result is that we have now been left on our own. And that is what the letter to the Romans describes in the Bible, that God has watched the earth, He is seeing what we do, that we pretend that we can make it without Him, and so He has given us over to our own fantasies and gimmicks and better, so-called better ideas. And we know that this is not only for Britain, it's valid for France and many other countries. And what I want to challenge you about is, if you are like me, I'm not a politician, I'm not in the spheres of government, and all I can say is, oh la 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 la, eh whoa, what are these people doing? Is it that they don't see? The Bible says if a blind leads a blind, you know what? They all fall into the ditch. And that is what's happening. It's quite depressing. And you feel disempowered. You have no way to express your views. Once in a blue moon there is a vote, but that doesn't really solve the problem day to day. What you see is you don't like. People try to get away by expressing themselves on the street, and last year here, thousands were locked up just for being on the street and shouting a bit too much or writing, putting their views on social media. That's all. They turned into criminals according to the courts. So, what is the solution? And I invite you to read the Acts of Apostles, chapter 27. You probably know the story. Paul was on his way to Rome under escort. In fact, he was a prisoner, a political prisoner. And he was on his way and he was put on a ship to travel to Rome. And at a point, the ship got into trouble. Winter was coming. The weather was not conducive for shipping and traveling. And Paul, because he was a personality, had some means of being listened to. And he talked to the conductor of the ship, the captain, and said, look, I advise you to stay for the winter, as was the usual thing to do when the weather is inclement. He advised him to stay in the harbor and wait for better days. But the man thought that he knew better. Of course, he was a specialist. He was a trained shipman. So he said, okay, thank you very much, but I know. And he set off. And if you read the later part of chapter 27, you see that the thing got worse and worse. Tempest upon tempest, and no day, no night. It was terrible. So bad that nobody was eating anymore. The ship was being thrown up and down, up and down. And Paul wrote that they were all desperate, thinking that they were all going to perish. But eventually, Paul prayed and asked God. And God told him, don't worry, there's a way out. And he gave the advice to the captain. Said, I belong to God. God told me this is what you should do. And at that time, the captain knew that this was his last chance of staying alive. So he listened. And eventually, they survived. But the ship was lost, just like Paul had said it would. And so I advise you, all of you that continue between oh la la and eh woo, well, pray. Tell God about the country, whether it's Nigeria for you or the UK or France or anywhere else. Just tell God about the country and say, Father, you placed us on that ship. You're not going to leave us to die. We're not going to starve. We're not going to freeze because the government has decided to give us no money for winter fuel again. God has a way out. And we thank God for the Bible that, as usual, has the final say.